Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and I'm co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is the leading provider of lines of credit to nonprofits. Our line of credit program is easy, inexpensive, and costs nothing until used, making it a great cash backup plan for your nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the programs, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And if you decide to apply today, we will even give you a $250 credit on file. Or feel free to give us a call at 862-207-4118. Just remember, the time to set up a line of credit is today, not when you actually have the emergency that comes up. And I would tell everybody that the nonprofit line of credit that we've been offering throughout the United States since 2012 has been extremely popular. It's really something that nonprofits have wanted for years and years and years. They weren't able to get it from banks, and now there's a company that does it, and we're excited about that as well. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with Sherry Quam Taylor from QuamTaylor LLC. Sherry teaches nonprofit CEOs and their teams how to break free from traditional fundraising models and activities that limit growth and never secure enough money to fulfill their organization's vision. In fact, today's topic that we're going to be covering really addresses that in detail. Sherry, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA Podcast.
I knew where I was.
Yeah,
Hey, Stephen.
I did.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting, and I'm glad. This is a good topic. I think all our topics are really good. And in fact, when you introduced the topic to me, because you gave me a couple of topics, I like that. I like when my guests give me a couple of things because, some of them I know what's hot. Some of them I know it's questions that executive directors or board members should be asking themselves.
Right.
And other ones are ones that we haven't covered that are like, oh, I didn't know about that. I mean, I'm not an executive director. I deal with them all the time. But so I found this one topic today that we're going to cover, when your nonprofit funding is plateauing. To me, it made a lot of sense. I was like, because not only do I see that happening in nonprofits, I also see that happening often in small businesses, and then you have to kind of regroup. So I really like that topic.
Good.
So, before we get into the topic, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm talking to you from Chicagoland today, where I believe I'm starting the 9th year of my business, if I have the numbers right. But I myself left my corporate career over a decade ago, probably 12 years ago now, and joined a nonprofit that I was super passionate about, kind of beyond passion, one of those ultra nonprofit people. And I was volunteering for them. And I eventually joined their organization. And I will say that I had a lot of early success in growing the organization. We tripled the revenue in about 18 months. But I will tell you that even in that time, in those years that I worked for the organization, who was doing awesome work, there were a lot of things that I saw the sector kind of suggesting leaders do that I felt that was actually keeping organizations from growing. A lot of the misconceptions or things that we're told that really are rooted in that expectation that nonprofits should be able to do more on less. We should be able to solve world problems or, change everything in a pandemic year and just kind of figure out how to do it on a dime. And I actually really dug deeply into that and found that it was actually sabotaging a lot of organizations' growth. And we'd had success probably coming around the other side and looking at the problem in a different way and pushed against a lot of the sector's misconceptions. And I quickly realized, and I have an entrepreneurial spirit about me. I was like, I want to start my own business and come alongside other leaders who are killing it, who are, changing the world really, but they're running great businesses. They're running great programs. They've turned organizations from red to black and maybe have reorged, but they still needed more money and they needed more cash that was unrestricted so that they could put back, kind of gasoline in the overhead tank, right? Like we all need to be spending more on overhead to grow. And so I did just that. I started my own business and haven't looked back. It's been a remarkable last even 18 months. And I do just that. I help leaders really look at their funding model and how they actually could reach or exceed that true financing plan that does fully fund their organization, program, admin, and fundraising. And so it's my absolute privilege, especially this last 18 months. Like I've just never been more proud to work in this sector. But I would also say we got to think differently. Like, don't waste this crisis, right? Like this is the time where we need to really shift into a new way of thinking and a new way of funding, because the money's there if we do it correctly. So we'll talk about that today.
Yeah. So, I mean, you give us some hints into this question I'm going to ask as to what the answer might be. But what is the most obvious indicator that, and I think well, let me just answer the question for it first. What's the most obvious indicator that a nonprofit is plateauing?
Yeah. There's kind of three main ones, but I already mentioned my favorite word, so let's start with that one. What's crazy is when an organization comes to me, of course, I quickly hop on their 990, and I oftentimes do see that their funding is just kind of bumping at the same number, or maybe it's growing slowly. But I hear so often that we don't have the funding to fulfill our strategic plan, or we want to grow, but like we just don't have that. So we don't know where we would get it. And what's interesting is I always go to a place that people typically, I think, don't expect me to go to first. And that's, are you spending enough? Are you investing into the overhead? My favorite word. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn, they know I'm talking about overhead all the time. Typically where I look is that people are not investing enough into their admin and fundraising that actually helps them raise more money. And so, so often we're like feeling like we can't spend that on fundraising, or we can't spend that on admin. Every dollar has to go to program. Well, to a certain point, like I totally get that principle, but it's actually the number one thing that is keeping organizations from growing is that they're afraid to spend. And I just posted on this, speaking of LinkedIn, this article I'd heard on this phrase on this podcast, and I'm telling everybody about it. And this gal was mentioning this concept of irrational frugality. I love it for my own life too. But it was like we've been taught for so many years to be irrationally frugal when growing our nonprofits, and we can't do that anymore. We're growing businesses that are changing lives. And so the spend is actually where I look. And I will tell you time and time again, and I always show a visual, when I'm coaching clients to show, hey, even though maybe your program percentage is 90%, if for a certain amount of time, you maybe brought it down to, upper 70s or lower 80s, invested that back into learning how to secure more unrestricted gifts, learning how to launch your mid and major level gift program in a really strategic way, learning what you need to stop doing so you can start doing more high ROI generating activities, that within 24 months, you will be putting sometimes double back into program. So to kind of round up the answer to your question, don't be so caught up on the percentage, because typically organizations, if they can spend less of a percentage on program and put that money into learning how to raise more money, it pays off every time.
Do you think that it's hard for people to ask donors for unrestricted money, and that's why they don't get as much money that goes to the administrative part of running a nonprofit?
Yeah, I think people think it's hard, but I also feel like the first step of that is, typically I find leaders of nonprofits they're experts at something else. They've never needed to know how to sit down and have an investment level conversation with the donor and lead them to a six-figure ask or larger. So it's almost like I don't know what I don't know, and so I don't think I would know how to sit down with that person, and so I won't do it, right? Or I'll go apply for a grant. That seems easier. I can still sit at my desk and kind of fill out that form, or have an event, or any of those more transactional activities. It feels easier, but it's actually what is oftentimes leading to an organization's funding plateau. And it certainly is leading to them oftentimes becoming way too dependent on one funding source. And we saw that so much in 2020, where so many people came to me and said, ooh, I was way too dependent on that event, or I was way too dependent on that one foundation, and now they've shifted their funding priorities, or the government, or whatever that was. People don't know how to ask. And then I think also fundraisers assume, which is not the truth, that individuals only want to fund projects. They only want to fund something tangible that they can see. Now, some do. Totally get it. We want to respect that. However, I see fundraisers successfully transition into this all the time. You have to understand how to lead a donor into a deep understanding of your organization's financial need, and how all of the work together really, adds up to the full need. And you've got to be able to sit down and have that numbers-based CEO to CEO stakeholder conversation. And Stephen, so many people avoid that, and that's actually where the money is.
Well, it's all about storytelling, right? And so, the executive director, I guess in almost every case, knows everything that's going on in the organization. So it's not like they're having to re-educate themselves on something they don't really know a lot about. Is that true?
Yeah, storytelling is huge. And I always, I go straight to the numbers and the investment level conversation. And of course, you're talking about the problem you're solving and the stories of changed lives and the impact that people's gifts are having. That's usually not the problem. The storytelling part that is the challenge is, how do we tell the financial story of the organization's need, right? Which really brings us to the second reason I find that organizations plateau, and it's their approach to budgeting. If I can kind of get a little dry for a second, you cannot sit down and tell the financial story and the financial need of your organization if you're not being honest in your budgeting process, and you're not owning the true financial need of your organization. What do I mean by this? Well, oftentimes, and I'll be honest with you, it's a little bit of a test when I ask the question. I'll say, hey, Stephen, so what do you need this year? And so they'll say, what's my budget? I'll say, yeah, sure. And I get a lot of, well, last year we brought in 4.2, so we'd like to get to that $5 million mark, right? Where if we're really honest with ourselves, we have to ask ourselves, what is the financial need of the organization? And is it $5 million need? Okay, well then let's, not be holiday wish list and double it, but until you are honest with yourself and actually have a true financial need, then and only then can you create an income plan that actually hits that need, right, and doesn't cause you to plateau, but then be able to sit in an investment level conversation and say, I'm so glad you asked. We actually have a $5 million need this year. Can I walk you through what that looks like? And so budgeting is, it's always funny when I do a webinar or podcast, I'm like, can we talk about budgeting? I love talking about budgeting because a lot of these root types of planning and comfort level with investing and approach to budgeting is actually the thing that's keeping organizations from growing their funding, which is a crazy concept, but I see it all the time. When we can be honest with ourselves and get out of that, we should be able to do more on less, get out of that mindset and really honestly know our budgeted need and be able to articulate that, you start growing into more unrestricted gifts, and that you can then invest back into overhead, which is what organizations need to grow.
Yeah, I guess too, there should be really two numbers that if someone says, like when you asked that question just now from 4.2 to 5 million,
Mm-hmm.
it focused on the top line, right? It should kind of, I would think that you should kind of give the person two numbers, and that is, I want to grow to 5 million, but I want to grow our unrestricted funds from, 5% to 10%,
Yeah.
of that. And, and even, does unrestricted funds always mean that it's going back into the organization's administrative stuff, or it's unrestricted, so
It's
you can do what you
unrestricted.
want,
You do with,
right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would love, so the model I teach, I want all of my clients in a perfect world that their top 30 donors would be yielding between 50 and 75% of their revenue. And I want the majority of that to be unrestricted, because that is how you grow. That leaders need that level of flexibility in their revenue stream to invest in growth.
So I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah.
So I missed it. 50%?
Oh,
50% should be
top
unrestricted.
30 donors, I want to be resulting in 50 to 75% of your revenue. And that's for a number of reasons we can talk about, but I want the majority of that to be unrestricted, so that an opportunity comes your way, you have the cash. A crisis comes our way. Hello, 2020.
Yeah.
You have the
Yeah.
cash. You can take advantage of a growth mindset all year long when you really have flexibility of cash. And I have so many people coming to me who are multi-million-dollar nonprofits who struggle to pay payroll because it's all restricted. They may have millions in the bank, but they do not have enough unrestricted cash coming in.
What is the standard that you see typically for like an under $5 million nonprofit?
Mm-hmm.
What percentage is usually the standard that is restricted? 75%, 90%?
You know what? No, I mean, I would hate for 75 or 90% to be restricted. Usually that's why people come to me, because if they're in that position, they're like, whoa, we get a tip away the other way. It really depends on their funding model. Like, are they getting tons of government grants or foundation contracts that are typically restricted? But I will tell you the commonality. I've yet to meet an organization who doesn't want more unrestricted cash, whether they're 1 million or $50 million client I have. They need more unrestricted cash so that they can run their businesses, right? They can invest in staff and invest in the types of things that help them raise more money. And so I wouldn't ever, it's different depending on, their missions or their models, their staff loads. But the key, I will say confidently, as much as possible, we want as much as possible unrestricted. And there's a way to do that. But that's where we go back to where we started the conversation of you have to invest in learning how to do that. If you do not know how to move out of very traditional, transactional, siloed fundraising approaches and really move into relationships building, relational based asks, having those sit down conversations in that CEO dialect to talk about how you're growing your unrestricted and why, and the dreaded percentage conversation. That's actually causing your funding plateau, that you're not leaning into those conversations that so many of us avoid. And you can't avoid them. Actually, I find that individual major donors, they're dying for information. They're dying for us to sit and tell them, how are we funded? How are we growing? What is our financial need? What are the concerns? What are the opportunities? And the best thing, I think that I would encourage even people listening, is to think about most individual donors they're usually probably entrepreneurs or business leaders themselves or community leaders. They've had some level of success in life. they've also had to sit down and probably ask an investor for money or have these kind of like stressful numbers conversations with clients. So really see it as an opportunity to speak their language. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Sherry. Like if someone came to me and said, I'm looking for $100,000, and let me tell you the biggest problem I'm having right now, we've kind of plateaued on how much money we can raise based on the staff that we have, and I need to be able to bring on more staff to do this, and this. That's right in my language. I kind of I get it,
Right.
And I'd say is I believe if we can provide that $100,000 unrestricted and invested in bringing on additional staff or whatever programs,
Sure.
internal, then I believe that we can get to the from 5 million to 6 million. So your investment of $100,000 really turns into $1 million.
Right.
Now I'm going to tell you the only thing that's on my mind. I know, and executive directors listening are not going to like it, and that is well, what are you paying the officers or the executive director? Is her salary going to go up, or is his salary going to go up?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I
So
mean,
that's the thing that I think that's what the public think a lot.
sometimes I will tell you, even you asking me that question, I couldn't tell you one of my clients who's had to really justify their salary.
Yeah.
Like I'm just sitting here thinking, like I don't run into that tons. And here's what I would say, like a lot of times, I find that almost well, what if they ask me about my salary? Well, what if they ask me how much I'm paying? Or what if they ask me that percentage question? Or what if they question our rent now that we're in a virtual? You gotta own. You're running a business. You know what's best for your business. Don't assume. Kind of don't make the decision for the donor that they're having a hang up on that or about that. Go in strong, and if they ask questions, answer them in a strong way and answer them in an honest, transparent way. I find that some donors, we have to be educators as leaders of nonprofits. We have to be educators not only about our mission and our programs and all of those things, but we also have to be educators on the misconceptions in the sector. Like if someone asked me that percentage question, I'd say, that's a great question. And let me tell you, let me talk a little bit about the misconception around that number, about that 90% program number. Let's talk about it. But for you to do that, you've got to know your numbers. You've got to be able to sit down and really articulate that need and then how you're going to bring it in. And then once you do secure their gift, how are you going to report back on that? It's a disciplined, transparent exchange. You got to be prepared for it. You got to be able to look ahead.
Yeah.
But I see it all this. The thing is, I see it all the time. That's why I'm so passionate about it. I see leaders make that shift all the time and really bring donors into a deep understanding of, no, actually, this is how we should do it. And then they're like, oh, well, that makes so much more sense. So push against some of those misconceptions that have just, they just plagued the sector for way too long.
Yeah, I think that too. We look at 990s as a company all the time, so we can see what the executive directors are getting paid, and we often see that they're being underpaid.
Mm-hmm,
So
right.
the issue in the industry, the issue in the industry is when you get like the huge multi-billion-dollar nonprofits that are paying the head people $1 million, $2 million a year. I think that gets people hear that and then they think, oh, the nonprofit that's $5 million and less has that same, paying the executive director a lot.
Yeah.
So, it's not a big deal, but, I think I think you're right in that whenever you go on to any type of fundraising or gift or donor call, you have to kind of be prepared for the objections that could come up depending on what. And, I'm sure people are pretty good at that.
And I say, welcome them.
Yeah.
I love, it's like, I think our gut is like, oh, I hope they don't ask me this. I was like, bring it on. Like, and not in a like, bring it on, but like, oh, let's have a discussion about that. There's nothing wrong, like even if the salary thing came up, which, again is, people are skeptical. But I would tell you that, just sitting here thinking, my client who probably makes the most of all my clients, he's turned the organization around in 3 years. They've never been bringing in more money. They're serving more kids than they ever have. They're board, they have a rock star board. So guess what? They attracted that type of person who can grow the mission and grow the nonprofit and create a sustainable solution and infrastructure. So is he worth a strong salary? I'd say so. And frankly, he's never had more people giving to him. So it's like we really have to check ourselves on the things that kind of go in our mind that keep us from securing larger gifts, that, a lot of things like, well, individuals would never give an unrestricted gift. Well, if we have it in our mind, we probably aren't going to ask for it. Or,
Yeah.
They're never going to give if it's this. Well, let's see, right? They would never give if we had a 9-month reserve in the bank. Well, hold on. Some of my strongest funded organizations have a whole year's worth of reserve in the bank. It's really learning to lead donors into a deep understanding and guiding them through these conversations and helping them see that you're a good investment and that really their mission for giving really does align with your mission.
What when you go into do consulting work with some of your clients for the first time, when can you tell that they've reached a plateau because of not so much of growing their staff, but because they really kind of need better training? It's a training issue more, like to get more out of the existing staff you have versus adding more staff. How can you tell?
Right. It's really, I can usually tell in the first conversation. Oftentimes I can tell from the 990. Like you said, that's where I always go, just to see some of the trends, see how the funding's coming in, see how they're spending money. I can quickly tell that's the case. But I think it's more of a kind of less numbers way of telling is, I have a lot of leaders of organizations who have full development teams and they're great, right? But oftentimes that team has kind of grown up through the ranks. Maybe they used to be program people and they know it so well. It's like, you'd be a great fundraiser. And so now they're over here and they're doing a pretty good job at writing foundation applications because they know the program so well. Not too bad at planning events and those sort of things. And, kind of say, oh, I've seen people do Facebook fundraisers. Let's default to that over there. But that's actually where, or kind of why they contact me, because it's like, still, that's not enough money, A. B, a lot of that is restricted, that grant proposal or, something like that. And so it's this sinking feeling of, I think we're leaving money on the table. I don't know that we are securing each of our donors' best gift. I know they're kind of responding to appeals and, once in a while we get a surprise in the mail, but they're not actively leading donors to give their best gift and then really lead them to give that gift every year. And so I can quickly tell that. And again, it's the fundraisers have done nothing wrong to this point, but it's so many people in the sector have not had that traditional fundraising training and experience that it's just like I don't know what I don't know type of scenario. That's fun for me because, I coach a lot of executive directors, but I also I do a lot of overhauls of teams to make sure they do know how would I create a financing plan every year that fully funds, in our example, that $5 million need. What does that look like? How would I even find top 30 donors? How would I start having those conversations? How would I know what I should stop doing so I can start doing more strategic activities that actually, result in larger gifts? And, how do I align my time with the dollars in essence.
Did you, when you started your company 18 months ago, did you know that that one of the key areas of the problem with nonprofits reaching their plateau was the unrestricted funds issue? Did you know that at the time?
Yeah. So I started my business 9 years ago.
Oh, 9 years ago. I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
It would have been a wild last 18 months ride if I would have started it. That would have been right at the beginning of
yeah.
COVID, wouldn't it? It's a good question. I've studied, as everyone has come to me. I've really studied where they've frankly have gotten stuck. And there's a statistic that just like sits right here on my shoulder that I think of all the time. And 91% of nonprofits have never reached the $5 million mark. And that bothers me because, my goodness, who we needed more these last 15, 18 months.
Yeah.
We have needed every one of them. And so that bothers me. And so it really caused me to study where people were getting stuck. And it really does come down to you're stuck when you can't invest in your own growth. And when you have great vision and dreams and an amazing strategic plan, but you can't even think of executing it because you don't have either enough cash or enough unrestricted cash. And so that's what I've studied, and that's the specific problem I solve. And I see organizations really make that shift, and shift organizations that have been in the red for 4 years, and it's like, oh, we're in the black, right? Or just really move into that understanding of the types of conversations that they've got to be having with their donors, because they're leaving money on the table if they aren't.
Yeah, we have about 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
And so in the consulting assignments that you go on to address the specific issue of unrestricted areas, donations, or what is the typical steps that go involved you have you have, I guess you have a conversation with the executive director. What kind of goes on in the next couple of months when you get engaged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I teach the methodology. I teach kind of in 3 different ways. One to smaller organizations who are typically at that $1 to $2 million mark, and then I teach leaders of CEOs of nonprofits and their teams, and then I also do custom training programs for national organizations who have regional presence, and they really want to equip their entire national team to level up their giving, if just national organizations or in a context of a foundation cohort. But the path is the same, whether it's the 2 million or 50 million. And the path is this. The path is, do your donors know you need the money? Do they understand what you do? What are all the things you might be doing that are actually keeping it hard from donors to understand that they need to give to you? So we're looking at how are you articulating your annual plans? How are you driving donors into that annual giving mindset? Your programs, are we talking in your programs, or excuse me, are we talking about what you do in a way that helps them see you're the experts that they should give their money to? Do they understand what you do? And then there's that financial need aspect. Are we raising to the right number in the first place? Do we have a $5 million need, right? When we have that, then we can actually use those things and have more, strategic investment level conversations, and actually lead donors on a great donor experience, and plan what that experience would be for that major donor, and lead them to an ask. And how do I do that? What tools do I use? What do I need to have in hand in that meeting that, you really confidently can ask a donor to raise their gift? And then it's about discipline and rhythms, and stop doing some things and start doing some new things. And then it just comes down to aligning the staff's time with the right activities that yield the amount of dollars. That's really the arc of most of my work, which is I love doing.
You ever have a client where they brought you on board, they did a tremendous job, they really, over a period of time, they got a lot more unrestricted funds. And then you get a call a couple of years later and they're like, we've kind of fallen back on our old ways again,
Mm,
and we're not getting as much unrestricted. We're kind of going back to the original, just getting restricted funds again.
yeah. I can't think of a specific example, but I will tell you that the biggest kind of, I guess, sign of success, I guess I'd say, of organizations continuing it long term. I actually just talked about this with a client this morning, is that they've actually made the time shift in their schedule. Because if it's a temporary, like, okay, now we should do this, but then, you aren't staying disciplined to the pipeline work, the connection work, the really exclusive, hands-on work that is required of individual giving. If we kind of let the urgent take over the important, the urgent being the application's due, it's Giving Tuesday, so we should do something. It's always that kind of stress between the urgent and the important, when long term, the important unrestricted relationship building work with people who you can pick up the phone and talk to when you need to always outweighs the restrictive activities. And so it's all about the discipline. A lot of my clients opt into monthly calls, and sometimes I do that for years with them because they value the accountability to say, I got to do it,
Yeah, I was going to say the awareness of staying on top of it. I mean, I can see where, if the executive director changes at the nonprofit, the leadership changes, where they could fall back into some bad habits again.
Yeah.
Listen, I think it's a very timely topic. I think I can see where a lot of the clients that Financing Solutions, my company, has, where you see them stay at the same revenue, and they think they have to go out and just hustle more and get more fundraising and just do more and more and more, instead of growing their organization, taking a different approach. So I think your topic, Sherry, is a really good one.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate you letting me share today.
Yeah. So, that's all the time we have for today's podcast. I'd like to thank, and I know Sherry, you have a white paper as well. I know it's relatively newer. What is the white paper about?
Yeah, the white paper. So hop on my website, QuamTaylor.com. That's my maiden and married name mushed together. And there's a link to my white paper on there that's been really popular. It's the problem with traditional fundraising and what to do instead. Really breaking free from a lot of the misconceptions that we talked about today.
Yep. Great. So I'd like to thank so much Sherry from QuamTaylor LLC for coming on to today's podcast. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend, and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. If you like today's podcast, please give us a review on your podcasting app to help us get the word out. The Nonprofit MBA has become very, very popular. I'm very proud of that. I think we're helping a lot of people. And if you are looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, you can please call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Sherry, if people want to get in touch with you, how would you suggest that?
Yeah, hop on my website, QuamTaylor.com, or they can reach out to me, which is Sherry at QuamTaylor.com is my email, which is SHERRY at QuamTaylor.com.
And QuamTaylor, just so everybody has it, it'll be in our show notes, but it's QuamTaylor. And
yes.
Yep. And so, Sherry, thanks a lot for coming on today. And to our listeners, it's been a challenging year for everybody, but I can't think of anybody who, we need everybody to pull together to make this world a better place. And every day you guys are out in the trenches, you're doing it. Sometimes maybe take a step back and pat yourselves on the back, take a little break, and then get back out there. And, I'm trying my best. I'm sure Sherry's trying her best to try to make the world a better place. But thank you for doing the stuff that you do. Everybody have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Get outside. Enjoy the good weather.